Hey everybody, Zach here for another edition of the Friday Fishing Reports. Today we got a pretty cool steelhead fly tutorial for you. Matt has asked myself and Jordan to do a couple steelhead flies, and unbeknownst to each other, we both kind of tied us very similar patterns. So I've got a prawn style fly here. I know Jordan did one last week. You can check out the video here, or wherever Matt decides to put that. It was a pretty cool pattern that he did. Mine's a little bit simpler, more of a single stage intruder style fly, but definitely a killer looking steelhead prawny kind of fly there. Give it a little slow roll to check it out. Yeah, not much to this one. Goes together fairly quickly. Utilizes a couple new materials that we have from one of our new suppliers, and I'll get to that in a little bit here. And yeah, that's kind of all I got for the intro on this guy. So let's hop to it. So I'm going to pop that guy out of my vise. You might notice this crazy little needle here. This is the Flexi needle. We sell them at the shop in the standard size as well as the Magnum or Predator one if you're doing big saltwater or pike flies. Kind of the tube that you want for those bigger tubes. The tube that I'm using is a 40-40 tube in blue. So this guy is your classic tube in the front, junction tubing built into the back. I like to kind of pre-cut my junction tubing just so that the fly's not sticking way out over here as I'm tying it. So I go about a centimeter or so, centimeter and a bit. And what I like to do is get that nice and round. Just tag this lightly with a lighter just to kind of curl the plastic on the outside there. I don't think it really matters. More aesthetically pleasing to myself. I slide that guy onto the mandrel. I do weight this fly, so to do that I use the ProSportfisher Flexi weight. This is in a medium size. They come in small and large as well. Before I put that on, I just tag the tube back here with a little bit of super glue. You're going to notice me using a fair amount of that, and as I put it on there, I just twist it to kind of get the glue all around the tube that's going on top there, and that should help to seat it in place. The glue I like to use is the Wapsi Fly Tire Z-Mint, basically a brushable zapper gap. Comes with the brush in there. One thing to note on this, you'll see me use this on my Chronomid videos in the future. There's a little insert here, and I like to just brush off all the excess on the inside of the tube. I don't like to do it around the top. If you do it around the top, you're never going to get this bottle open again. So just a little tip there for you. For thread on this fly, I'm going to use an Ultra Thread in 140 in Peacock Blue. Kind of just goes nicely with this fly here. And the thing with tubes, you don't want to really crank on your thread wraps. That's why I do periodically throw in a drop of super glue or so. If you really crank down on your wraps on the tubes, you'll never get them off the mandrel. It's a mistake that a lot of beginners do, and yeah, one little tip there for you. So I'm just going to build up a little bump there, and I'm going to cover this Flexi weight as best I can. Not the best coverage here, but you get the idea. Create a nice thread base. I'm going to trim that guy away, and with the Ultra Thread I can spin it counterclockwise, and that opens up the thread and just allows me to cover more ground on this. I'm going to go back up to the front here, going to give another counterclockwise spin, flatten that thread, and come back one more time, and that tube is not going to go anywhere. The next material that we're going to tie in here is going to be part of the body. It's some Lagerton flat braid on the card in sky blue. Probably the best material for doing tinsel bodies and braided bodies. It actually does lay flat. Some of the other ones from Hairline and Wapsi and the other brands, they kind of stick out a little bit and they're kind of a little straggly. This stuff is much higher quality. So I'm just going to tie that in the length of the Flexi weight that I put in there. I'm going to utilize the rotary feature on my vise here, and I'm going to take a full turn at the back and then slightly overlapping going forwards, and you see how nicely that Lagerton lays. Nice and flat. This stuff is a little bit expensive, so I do like to keep it on the card. undo some of these wraps here. Then I'm going to capture it in right on that little thread dam that I made, trim that away, and I have a nice flat braided body there. One little straggler. Trim that away, not the end of the world. Perfect. So now we're going to create a little bump for our shoulder, and for that I got some crystal chenille in like a peacock blue or silver doctor blue, whatever color you want to call it, to match the theme here. And this is a large size. So what I like to do with this material is I like to take some of these fibers and pull them off the cord on the inside, just so I have the bare cord to tie in. Just creates a little less bulk for the fly. I'm going to tie that in right at the base there. I'm just going to take 1 to 2 wraps. It's pretty bushy and pretty full, this stuff. Take one and sneak another half turn in there, like so. Come in here, tie that off. This is, you can use dubbing for this step if you like as well. This chenille is just a little bit quicker. Like I said, this is a pretty simple tie. You can go with the dubbing if you want. So there we go, a couple wraps backwards on that just to help push all the material back. The next material is going to be a little bit more flash. It's a polar chenille variant, Senyo's Aqua Veil. This is in Popsicle, so it's kind of a bluey, greeny kind of color. There's some really cool colors of this, and we have a good selection of this in the shop. So I like to tie this with all the fibers pointing down. That way when I wrap it, they actually face backwards. If I tie them and they're facing up, they're going to want to go forwards on me. So I'm just going to capture that in, like so. This is a good filler material, helps create nice little shoulders and flash accents on your flies. You've seen us use this stuff before. And here I'm probably going to get 3 to 4 wraps. And as I'm doing so, I'm palmering this, so stroking all the fibers back. That's 2, 3, and we'll get 1 more here. And then I'll tie that off. This creates a nice little shoulder for our next material, which is in, actually nope, I'm not jumping ahead of myself here. Next one is we got to tie in the eyes. So I'm just going to wrap back on that. This is going to help to force all those fibers back. Just kind of wet your fingers, makes it a little more manageable, which is nice. You can see we got a nice even coverage all the way around. That little bit of flash. Next, we're going to tie in our eyes. So these are mono eyes. I've made these before. I've got a tutorial for it. I'll get Matt to post a link up here somewhere for you. So I kind of do them in pairs on one chunk of 30-pound mono. And check out the video if you want to see how these are made. So I got my pair. I'm just going to cut that. And what I like to do is I take a pair of pliers that have a nice flat edge to them. And you can see the curvature here. I just want that to face outwards so that these eyes pull away from the body. And the length I'm looking for is basically to the end of that chenille. So I get that curvature where I want. I kind of place the flat part of my pliers against the mono, and I just give it 1 crimp and a 2nd crimp. And then I'm going to cut off the excess. So when I cut off the excess, I got this little flat bit here. Hopefully you guys can see that. And I'm going to leave little nubbin of the mono at the back there. So that way if this ever pulls or anything like that, it's going to catch on that little nubbin. And I tie these in on a little bit of an angle, facing upwards, like so. So there you go. You can kind of see that guy sticking out. I'll do the other side here in a second. So that side's tied in. I'm going to grab my other eye. I'm going to measure this up so it's about the same as the other one. Transfer that measurement to my pliers here. 1, 2 crimps. Trim away, leaving that little nubbin there. And I'm going to tie this in on your side of the tube. Just like so. So again, on a little upward facing angle, kind of like so. A few wraps to secure this, right to the base of the nubbin. And just for a little added security at this stage, I like to add just a little drop of super glue. And that's going to soak in to the thread wraps and make those so they don't pull out. And I just like to cover that up quickly. And our next material is going to be that new material I was talking about. But first, before I grab that, I'm going to make myself a dubbing loop because I'm going to spin this material. So I just pull out a length of thread, put my finger on top, go back towards the tube, take 1, 2, 3 wraps around, and then I go around this way around that thread to lock it up. 1, 2 wraps around, pull that tight to the tube and wrap back on it. So I've got this dubbing loop here. I'm just going to tuck that out of the way. So that next material that we're grabbing is a new one, like I said, from one of our new suppliers, Shore Fishing. They're based out of Quebec, so a great Canadian company. We're very excited to have a bunch of their products in. And this is their fin raccoon. I love fin raccoon. I've tied with it for a number of years. It's very similar to Arctic fox, but what you're going to find, it's a lot lighter, a lot more flowy, and a lot longer, which is nice. So sometimes fox, the tail strips and stuff, they're really short fibers. They're great for intruders and such, but sometimes you want to make a bigger shoulder. So that's where this stuff comes in. Great for hair wing patterns, and like I said, a lot longer material. We've got it in a couple colors coming in, and we got more coming as well. So come on into the shop and check it out. Pick some up for yourself. So I treat this a lot like fox, so I'm just going to grab a chunk here. One other thing you'll notice with the fin raccoon, there's not as much under fur. The fur is actually part of the material that I like to use, so I'm just going to grab a chunk here. And I'm going to trim that off from the hide as close as possible. Like so. And I'm just going to pinch this all together. Anything that doesn't want to be there, I'm just going to get rid of. Just a light little pull. Same without the front. You can see there's these really long guard hairs, which I like. You can see kind of the under fur in this chunk here. So this under fur portion of the fly, I want it to extend just past the puller chenille with the guard hairs all going in front of that. So I'm just going to pop this clump into my dubbing loop and just make sure that's all lined up how I want. And you can see I've got this big clump here. I just need to grab my dubbing spinner just so I can close up that loop. And I just give it a couple hand twists just so nothing falls out. Then I'm going to take a dubbing needle here, and I'm just going to kind of spread this material out. In total, eventually this chunk here will be about 3 to 3.5 inches, somewhere around there. And I'm just putting my finger on the back here and just spreading this material out. And I know I've got it spread out enough when I can see completely through the fin raccoon. If it's too dense and I can't see through it, it's too thick. It's not going to spin properly. When you go to pick at it, all the material is just going to fall out. It just becomes a nightmare to deal with. So take your time here and poke at it and spread that material out till you got this big clump of fin raccoon in your dubbing loop. And eventually, I got a little bit here that I need to spread out. Eventually you'll have something like this that you can just start to see through, which is what I'm looking for. And since I didn't spin this at all too much here, I can still actually play with this. If I wanted a little more length, I could pull it one way. If I wanted it a little shorter, I could pull it the other way. That's looking pretty good to me. So I'm going to come in here with my scissors. I'm going to trim this fairly close to my thread. I don't want a lot of butt ends here, because if you have more butt ends, it's going to create that big, huge shoulder here that I don't really want on this fly. I want it to lay a little bit flatter. So I'm going to come in, and just a couple millimeters of length is really all I want. I'm just going to trim that guy away. You can save all these butt ends for dubbing if you want. It does make a great dubbing. So you don't have to let all this go to waste. Just like that, I've got everything where I want. Could have maybe made this dubbing loop a little bit bigger, but I'm going to give this a spin. Counterclockwise, just kind of pull some of this away. There we go. Give that another spin here. So I didn't give myself quite a big enough dubbing loop here. And just kind of push that away with my thread or my scissors. And once I get this dubbing loop going, I got this big glob of fin raccoon here. I can come in with my dubbing needle I can just kind of pick at it. The goal here is to get rid of all these big giant clumps of material that's all spun on itself and matted. So you know that you're done picking out when you've got a pretty thin cord again that's visible. Any big clumps here, just keep picking at. You want all these guard hairs out of there. And this gets a little bit more here. Take your time with this. You can take a Velcro brush to it too, if you're confident that you got all the materials bound in there good enough. I'm going to give this another little spin, like so. That's looking good. And again, just pick it out a little bit more. That's probably good there. Kind of like trimming deer hair, you could pick at this all day. So I'm going to pull this straight up. I'm going to lick my fingers. If you have a cup of water next to you as well, that's great. And I'm just going to pinch at the cord and pull. Pinch and pull. Just kind of turn this into a fin raccoon hackle, if you will, with all the material flowing backwards. And I'm going to come in here and just do one wrap in front of the other. And just create this nice body for this prawn. That's going to flow really well in the water and look amazing at the same time. I'm just going to keep going here. One wrap in front of the other. I'm going to get one more wrap here, I think. That's going to create a nice full body, but not too full. You still want to be able to see some of that underbody, that lagartine underneath. It's going to create a nice glow, add a lot of life to the fly. If it's too dense and you can't see through it, all that underbody is for naught. Trim that away. I'm just going to pull that back, take a couple wraps back on this to help all that material flow towards the back of the fly. I'm going to quickly come in here again, just kind of pick all this out. Don't dig too deep with your dubbing needle, 'cause I've had it happen in the past where you actually dig into your dubbing loop and you pull that material out, and that is not what we want to have happen here. Just like so. Pick that all out. Looks pretty good. Just kind of wet my fingers, pull that material. You can kind of see the length that we got going on there. Starting to look pretty prawny. Next, we're going to add a little more flash. This is just going to be some crinkle mirror flash in pink. This is a really cool flash if you haven't played with it. It's all crimped, reflects light really nicely. I'm going to grab about 4 strands out of the pack here, trim that away. And I'm going to tie this in on top, kind of in a V shape to mimic the same angle as those eyes. So I want this to be a little longer than the fin raccoon. So I'm going to tie that in on an angle on top here. Just get every strand trapped in there. One doesn't want to get tied down. There he is. So got that tied on a bit of an angle there. 2 more wraps. Grab the excess, pull it over onto the other angle. So hopefully you can see that it's made kind of a V shape. I'm going to come in here, trim that so they're all the same length. Just one more wrap there to get that one strand locked in place. It's looking pretty good. Next we're going to add our hackles, which are some grizzly saddle hackles in pink. I'm going to find 2 that are roughly the same shape and size. Should probably done this ahead of time, but that's fine. So I'm going to grab those 2. They look pretty close. Just going to pluck those away from the hide. And I want these just to be long enough that they're a smidge longer than that flash that we just tied in. And I kind of prep these at the same time here. So I just line up the tips and I put them on top of the fly. I get my length, which is about there. Then I pull back these extra fibers and I pull them off the stem. Now these 2 hackles are essentially the same length, which is what we want. We can tie them in one at a time. Again, I'm going to tie them in on an angle on the inside of the eyes, just to kind of mimic the flash in the eyes that are there. I'm just going to take 1, 2 wraps on top, just to make sure that's sitting all right. That's looking pretty good. Sometimes you get lucky and you get it on the first go. You can just slightly change that angle. If you ever find it twists on you, it's because that feather wants to be on the other side. So just unwrap it, put it on the other side, and you'll find it sits nicely. And this guy will go next. So again, just put that right on top. 1, 2 wraps. Look at that. Not every day you get them to sit perfectly on the first go. So I got them kind of splayed out. I'm going to take a couple wraps back here. I'm going to fold these guys over. A couple wraps there just to secure them in place. Those shouldn't pull out. Just for some added security here, I'm going to add another touch of glue right on top. That's going to soak in and keep those hackles from pulling out. Alright, next, so I wanted to kind of add a little bit more depth to this fly, a little more movement, if you will, in materials. And what I found works really well is a feather that's not really used on these capes much. So on the back up at the top, you'll find you get these kind of schloppany looking feathers. They're super soft, they're nice and barred. This is going to look nice on this fly, so I grab one, kind of pull away at the stem a little bit here, and pull some fibers off just to get a length where the fiber length is a little shorter than the eyes. I'm going to tie this in with a little bit exposed on the top there, so that way when I set that first wrap I can actually set it where I want. I'm going to tie this in right on the side of the hook shank, or on the tube. 5 or 6 wraps there. Trim the butt end away. And I've got that blank spot there, so I can kind of get this seated how I want. This one's not going to cooperate too much here. Sometimes they don't want to cooperate. So let's see if I can get it going here. No, that guy doesn't want to go that way. So I'm going to wrap away from me on this guy, which is fine. And I want all these fibers to be going backwards, so that's why I'm wrapping the other way. I'm just going to take 2, 3, 4 wraps there. Kind of pull them back on this as I go. Wiggle my thread through. Try to tie this guy off. 2 wraps there. Take 1 wrap there. And with all these fibers going forward, I'm just going to pull them all back and wrap back on them like so. And trim away the rest of the feather there. Probably save that one for a smaller one. There you go. We got this nice grizzly hackle here, looking pretty good on this fly. Next we're going to add our carapace to the fly, so the top of the fly, and I've got a blue mallard feather here. And what I like to do, I get a rough measurement. I want the tips of this feather to just reach the eyes. So once I get that measurement, it should be about there. Looks pretty good. I pull away the excess feather there, and I just give it a little kink at that spot. So now it's got a tie-in point, and then I'm going to strip away the excess. And with these mallard feathers, the stems are quite round, so I grab my pliers again, and I just flatten it. Just a couple little crimps. This makes it a little easier to tie in. And I sit that right on top. Then I give this a couple wraps here. That seats it nice and pretty. Come in, clear up the tag, hit it with one more touch of super glue. And then I go straight into a whip finish. So with tube flies, I like the extended reach whip finishers. The short ones don't quite do it for me. You can also do it by hand if you like, but I like the way a whip finisher seats knots. 4 or 5 turns, we got some super glue down there, so I don't worry about that too much. That's going to be pretty secure. And the last thing we're going to do here is fit a cone to the front of the fly. So this is a Pro Sonic disc. There's little metallic discs. They help to protect all the front of the flies. This is a medium size in blue. We also carry them in large size. If you want a little bit more weight, they do have all the porting on there. So it just allows water to go through them and allow the materials to breathe a bit better. So I'm going to put another dab of glue kind of around the top half of the tube. I'm going to slide that disc on. When I put it on there, I give it a little twist, and since it is super glue, it sets pretty quickly. So I just get it so it seats nicely. I hold it there for a second or two. That's pretty much going to hold it in place. I'm just going to slide that off quick here, and I'm going to trim that extra tube. So there's just a couple millimeter of tube sticking out the front. I'm going to pop that back onto the mandrel. And make sure that the tube is out from the tip of the mandrel. I'm going to tag this with a lighter. And what happens is that tube will then curl and melt and butt right against that disc. Slide it back on, and you've got a completed tube fly ready to go. So there you have it. The Prawn Star fly, a nice and easy steelhead prawn on a tube. This one should bring you some luck. I will have some of these available at the shop. Hopefully by the time this video airs, I'll have them in pink and blue and probably a black and blue. So a couple options for you there. Hope you guys enjoyed, and we'll see you next time.